Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 7th episode of our weekly podcast, Just Politics, Our World View, where we discuss politics in Barbados, the region, and the rest of the world. Remember that you can find us here live every Sunday from 5 to 7 p.m. Each week, I'm grateful for the support that we continue to get from you who choose to join us, and also for Sasha Lee, who continues to manage our social media posts and marketing. Thank you for joining us, and welcome once again to our show. I am your host, Ayo Olalara, and this is my co-host, Dr. Terry Harris. Over to you, Terry.
Thanks, Ayo. Welcome back, everyone. So this week is a special one for us as we're introducing our new guest host, Mr. Devaron Bruce. You guys can expect to see him joining us in this new role from time to time. Devaron is here today with a newly minted MPhil in political science. Congrats, Devaron, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Terry. Welcome to everyone as well, too. Thank you so much.
You don't seem too excited, newly minted. Anyway. So today, Devaron, Ayo, and myself will be discussing the topic independence and into the future. I look forward to a robust discussion with you guys, joining with your comments and questions online. So this week's episode is brought to you by Thinking Analytics, builders of data models in Barbados and the Caribbean. You can send them an email at thinkinganalytics@gmail.com. And please stay tuned for us. Well, please stay tuned with us for the next segment, which is the weekly roundup with Ayo. Ayo, take it away.
Thank you, Terry, and congrats again, Devaron, and welcome to the weekly roundup. Tomorrow, Barbados celebrates 54 years of independence, and as usual, the main argument in these independent streets is conkeys with or without raisins.
I would just like a conky.
Look, if you eat conkeys without raisins, kudos to you, but you have no idea what you're missing. And in Barbados, 32 new lawyers were admitted to the bar, and the Chief Justice gave the most important piece of advice the lawyers here need to be aware of. Do not, under any conditions, fiddle with clients' money.
Good advice.
And the Central Bank of Barbados launches a commemorative coin in recognition of the contribution of frontline workers during the COVID response. Frontline workers was appreciative, really want a salary that's more than actual coins. And in the US, Trump has said to reporters that he will leave the White House if Biden is confirmed as the winner, but that he will continue to fight to prove that the election was stolen by the Democrats, Mexico, Venezuela, Cuba, Chile, Barbados, basically anyone at this point that he can point his finger at. Anyway, as we show you the best memes this week, take a listen to his concession speech.
My fellow Americans, a short time ago, Joe Biden beat me in the election, and not only did he win, he won by a lot, actually. Therefore, it is time for me to step aside because, let's face it, I wasn't probably on my game and I wasn't doing so well. And, I'm the only president in history to lose the popular vote twice and to get impeached. It's time for a change. The greatest dream in the world is that Joe Biden wins because the winner of this vote was decided by a fair and open election. Therefore, I humbly concede to Joe Biden. The American people have responded, and they said to me, "You're fired. Fiend, get out."
I'm not sure what you guys were expecting, but that's about it. That's like all you're gonna get from Trump right now. So don't expect anything else.
That's the best that we can hope for where Trump is concerned.
And we spoke about the commemorative coins earlier. Well, this essential worker made it known how she feels about the glowing gesture. She said, "Raise my minimum wage if I'm so essential. Am I supposed to care about a flashlight in my pocket?"
Oh, wow.
I don't think that's what she said.
Or worse to that effect.
Yeah, those were her sentiments.
And these glowing coins are going to present a problem for cheapos like you, Devaron.
Wow. I can't even defend myself because you're so correct.
Oh, Jesus. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Force wished their commissioner a happy birthday via his page, and Trinis, well, they were Trinis.
Self-praise is more praise, right?
Pretty sure it didn't come from him. Pretty sure it came from somebody managing his page, but Trinis had a ball on this, and this was the best meme that I got out of that, yeah. It's not, I'm corny, I thought that was really funny anyway. And Biden has announced his transition team, and the Trump team is surprised that he hired he hired actual professionals. And here his children, they're like shocked.
Nepotism over, right? More nepotism.
I mean, people forgot what it was like before, right?
Actually have professionals as opposed to children. Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
Your children.
And he's a big man baby anyway, so.
And Americans are overly excited as January 20th approaches, when their new president will be sworn in and they get rid of the three stooges, the fly, the lie, and the die, leaving soon, January 2021. Yeehaw!
That's good.
And on that note, here is the weekly roundup. Viewers, please note that you also have the opportunity to ask questions or to contribute to the program with your comments. Simply type them into the comment section below. WhatsApp us on 833-9886 or email us at jpourworldview@gmail.com. And please keep sharing this live and liking our page as we attempt to grow as organically as possible. We appreciate your help and your support. And now on to our main program. So as was stated earlier, this week we will simply have a conversation with you. Tomorrow, as a nation, we will celebrate 54 years of independence, and we are set to finally become a republic by the same date in 2021. This is an important milestone for us as a nation, which was birthed from the genocide of the first people, the Taínos and the Kalinagos, the enslavement of Africans, and the colonization. There were many developments and advancements over the years of which we as a people can be proud. As an island of about 166 square miles, we can boast one of the highest literacy rates in the world, an educated populace with residents taking advantage of our free education system from nursery to university level. And we are a functioning parliamentary democracy with peaceful political elections and, more importantly, transfer of powers. We also, for the most part, enjoy a pretty high standard of living, with most people having indoor plumbing, electricity, access to the internet, all the modern consumer goods as any developed countries. We also have all the modern conveniences such as coffee shops, modern eateries, and so forth. Up until 2008, Barbados was classified as the fastest developing state in the world. That honor now belongs to Guyana. Beyond the surface, however, there are quite a few developmental issues that have retarded our growth, and I would like us to discuss some of them today. Many of them are legacies of our colonial past and are so ingrained in our society that the conversations around them are difficult, and they often divide the country. For instance, the elitism in our educational system, mainly through the 11+ examination and the fixation on recognizing some schools as elite. This is often defended as necessary to encourage competition, whilst ignoring the grim implications left behind as teachers and the state at large both pursue personal glory through those students who learn best via the main teaching methods, or those that have the resources and lifestyles to better take advantage of the current system. Many left behind never recover, and eventually a high proportion of these make up the main population of our prison. So as we move towards the celebration of our independence, the first thing I want us to discuss is our educational system, the problems inherent in it, and how it can be made better.
Okay, yeah, nice first question. I guess education is important, simply because, when we think about the future of Barbados and the independence project that we're entertaining, of course, the future of the country is pretty much the children, right? And the education of the children and continuing education of the adults. So like you, Ayo, I believe that the education system that we have, well, it is still very, we have an excellent education system as evidenced by people like yourself, people like Devaron, some people will say me, right? But so we have an excellent education
Honest.
here in Barbados, but like you, I believe that there is scope for some reform because, of course, we're not ticking all of the boxes with regards to education. So we can still think about whether we do need the 11 plus examination in order to allocate students to schools. I mean, there are more efficient ways to allocate students to schools, right? Because simply allocate them based on where they live. But then that has implications as well, because the schools that are perceived that are the better institutions, individuals living around them, it becomes the market then develops for accommodation in that area. So there's a fallout, or there are repercussions as a result of even making that move. So it's something we have to think about. But like you, I do believe that we need to think about the education system, try to fine tune it. We have a good one, and we have one that can be considered to be excellent by some, but of course we're leaving too many young men, for the most part, to fall through the cracks at particular institutions. And where we have problems, we need to focus on them, and we do have some problems in that regard. We also have issues with regards to the development of new skills, and keeping our people up to date with the technologies of the future and of the present. And our schools need to focus on inculcating our students with these type of skills, right? So there are more things that we could talk about, but I'll just pause there. So that's my response. Yes, I agree. Perhaps 11 plus should go, and things like that, but there are implications for moving beyond it, and we need to think about them as well. And also, with regards to other aspects of educational reform, we need to think about skills, and we need to think about how we can fix these schools where we have these issues.
Yes, and I'm in
Anything,
total
Devaron?
agreement. Yes, certainly. You mentioned the 11 plus, and I always use my personal experience with this example because many persons see me now and assume that I was always doing well academically. And I always use this personal experience to say that I did relatively well at 11 plus. I believe it was 214. I got an a B or something like that. And my initial school was the Dublin Secondary, and we know what happened there. And I ended up at the Ali Secondary, which I went to as well.
A
And
brilliant school.
just it certainly is. This all schools I think have the potential to be brilliant, but it's the psychological impact of common entrance that I really want to pinpoint to, because while I was in secondary school, I found myself in a situation where I started to interact with other individuals that I would say were better than I was academically. And it somewhat put me in a box into thinking that that is the best that I could do. And at the secondary level, most persons don't know this, but I have 4 CXCs and 3 of them are grade 3s. And after secondary school, I remember very well, I was applying for Barbados Community College. And when I got there, I saw other individuals who I know from other secondary schools and at my secondary school, who essentially put me in a place where I felt as though I was not good enough. And I left Barbados Community College not even bothering to apply. The following year, being forced by my mother, I applied again and I did not even get into the school, to be honest. And I talked to one, I probably shouldn't say this, but I talked to one of the administrators and they sent me essentially to one of the tutors that I applied for, which would have been political science, and we spoke. And she asked me how I did at secondary school. I said I was generally a C student, and she allowed me in. And I would say that from then on until today, I became an A student, and it wasn't because of that experience alone. It was because of an experience I had with a very specific teacher, where she said to me that you can do a lot better. You get a lot of C's, but you can do a lot better. And I told her that I've always been a C student. And for the first time I said out loud, the thing that I was thinking for so many years, A's are for Harrison College students. A's are for Queen's College students. And she said to me that A's are for anyone who's willing to work for it. But it just shows that at the age of 18, 19 years old, I still had the legacy of common interest on me, which imprinted onto me that I was not of a quality to achieve it because they did not go to Queen's College, because they did not go to Harrison College, because they did not go to Commonwealth. I was essentially a C student, and that stuck with me for a very long time. And it took years to break that psychological process and that psychological conditioning. So persons who argue that it is not there, I am one of the examples that it is certainly there.
And you're one who didn't go down the road that other C&D students go down. But then you went to the alley school, so we wouldn't have allowed you to anyway.
And then he had a person who intervened at a critical moment, like, to tell him that he has the ability. And all it really takes sometimes is buy-in. That you can actually be an A student. You don't have to settle for what has gone before. But yes, so continuing this theme, I guess, of the education system and reform. So I think we are pretty much in agreement that we could do better than the 11+ exam. We don't need to have these selective exams to allocate students to to secondary schools. We could probably do better. So what are some of the alternatives that you guys might think up? Well, what are the alternatives?
I personally like zoning. I'm a mom, as you guys know, and you see shuffling around children. It takes a lot out of you. Zoning makes sense for more than one reason. All right, it makes sense from the whole aspect of bringing our schools into the 21st century, leveling the platform basically, and making sure that each school gets the adequate resources and the best type of teachers and all these things. Because if we have different types of people in each school, then we have to pay greater attention to those things, right? On top of that, we have to look at the way in which we teach different groups of people and different types of learners. And that will force our education system to pay more attention to that. From the economic perspective, I went to the Allen School and I lived at the time in St. Barnabas in my childhood home. And it took like 4 buses daily for me to get to school. Yeah. So, I mean, money is what it is. $1 yesterday was the $3 today. You understand where I'm coming from? So you just imagine the sheer amount of bus fare that parents who maybe single parents or whatever, they have to spend to get those children to school. Or if they have to drive, some people like to drive their children to school, the amount of gas that you have to use to do so. Apart from that, there's also the argument that people put forward that if you go to school in your neighborhood, well, therefore you don't get exposed to very much. But I mean, what is your neighborhood? We live on 166 square miles, right? So if you go to school and you live in, let's say you live in Enterprise and you go to school at Foundation Secondary School, I mean, Bridgetown is right there. I can't tell you the amount of times that I drop my daughter and her friends off at Sheraton Center or down to Bridgetown because they're going somewhere. Children get her wrong. So I don't even buy into that argument. And I think that argument is an excuse, basically. It's not like it's not like we are in the US and we have these numerous states or even Guyana and so forth where to basically see the rest of the country. And I mean, if you're in Guyana or you're in the US, you do go to school in your state, don't you?
You certainly
unless you're
yeah.
off to college, right? So the argument to me is not a strong argument. I can see more arguments for than against with zoning. I personally like zoning. I take special pleasure each morning in driving 3 minutes to drop off my son and then an extra 2 to drop off my daughter and get him back to my desk to continue working. And I mean, there's nothing like, I cannot imagine driving them further than that right now.
And I have to certainly agree with you because I taught at a secondary school, which would have been West St. Joseph or Grand Adams Secondary School for a semester or a term, as they would call it. And one of the biggest concerns that I had as both as a teacher, as a form teacher, is issues such as the lateness. And lateness is often not even the fault of the student. It's just the infrastructure, the absence of buses, or just the time that it takes for students to be coming from the south into the north of the country. And when we put it into context, these are students who already have difficulties, whether in reading, whether in their numeracy, whether in work, what have you. And for them to lose 15, 20, 30, 40, even an hour a day because of a commute is problematic. And then they're already tired by the time that they're there. They're already late. They're already stressed. They have to deal with, pressures such as being late and questions as to why they're late. And then one of the things I also noticed was the inability of parents to be more involved in their students' life because of the location of your school. So they're coming from a socioeconomic background where the parent may not have a vehicle. So when you have the parent teachers associations, where you have various things you may have to engage students and parents at the same time, they're unable to either get there or get there in the right time. And a lot of concerns such as extracurricular activities as well too. Because one of the things that save a lot of students is the discipline that is implanted through extracurricular activities, but it was difficult to keep students out of school 4 or 5 o'clock when the bus system, for instance, is not very good, where the distance away from the school where most of the students may be coming from might be quite far. So these are actual things that really have a significant impact on students' life, such as the distance away from being from the school. So I have to agree with you.
Yeah, I think
And you would remember running down to Shuri Village, all the way to Shuri Village, just to try to get a seat in the bus, so you don't have to stand up all the way to Bridgetown. When I drive from when I take the country, drives with the children and stuff now, and I drive from Belle Plaine to Shuri Village, I'm like, I used to run down here. Absolutely crazy, like every single day. You know what I mean? Yeah, Terry.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna be in agreement with you guys because I think the arguments the arguments that you just recited in favor of maybe moving away from this selective assignment process for by the 11 plus for zoning. I think the arguments that you've been making make a lot more sense, right? And of course, we have the counter points that people will want to point to regarding the cost of living in certain areas, the fact that if you move to strictly zoning, then the areas around the quote unquote better schools, that area now becomes more expensive to living, and you can see some form of gentrification in these areas that we might not want to see happening. So those are some counter arguments. I think we can take steps to ameliorate them, but perhaps the whole idea of having our children go from pillar to post. I mean, in Barbados right now, we know that we have a system where we have some aspect of zoning in allocation of students, along with the 11 plus allocation based on performance, right? So we know we have a mixture of both. So we're not totally in the area or in the world whereby individuals are just assigned to schools based on just performance, and there's this hierarchy of schools from better to lower ranked schools. We don't have that, although we kind of still have a hierarchy of schools. We don't have this strict assignment process. We have some aspect of zoning in our system, but we could probably do a lot better. I think is the point you're making.
The argument, sorry, Terry, but the argument that you were putting forward that people say about gentrification of these neighborhoods and so forth, I'll be honest with you. If we zone our secondary schools, right, I can't see majority of the people who would only send their children to Harrison College or Queens College or one of the quote unquote oldest secondary schools, deciding to send the child to the school closest to them, even if that school is not a school of their standard, they're going to send their child private. Majority of people are going to send their children private. Now,
what are the implications of that then?
Yeah, well, that's the class issues that we have built into our system. That's one of the class issues that we have built into our system. That's one of the idea. Pardon?
I say from there we might see a proliferation of private schools.
Exactly. But then what it means is that the average person, you and I, our schools become better because we have to pay more attention to all of our secondary schools. So all of our schools become better as a result. We can't pay attention to what somebody who's leaders decides to do. If they want to open 50 government private schools and pay whatever every month to do it, then I it's up to them. That's a personal choice basically, and I don't think that we can pay attention to that. What we have to do is that we have to make the schools that are available to our children, you and me and Joe Blow down the street, we have to make sure that those schools are the best possible schools for our children, and that's where our focus needs to be.
Yeah, no, I agree. We also need to think about the implications of the policies that we might be recommending, right? So I think it's quite plausible that what you say is true, that a number of the upper middle class say upper middle class individuals might decide, if this were the case, to pull their students from the public system and private. That's plausible. And then we also need to think about the implications of that then for the public school system, right? So these are things that we need to think about, and not say, okay, well, let's make a move and then not understand what the implications are. I'll tell you this, I'll leave you on this for this with regards to this education system. The country that we have patterned our education system behind, UK, as well has a long time moved past this 11+ system for sending students to public schools, long time ago. So we're behind the time. All right, but I know, so you touched on a point where you were pointing out, well, you're making a point regarding the assessment of other forms of ability at secondary school, and I guess at primary school as well. How can we reform our education system in such a way that we can assess these other forms of ability? What do you think? What are your ideas there?
Well, yeah. So there are now. This is where the idea of the private schools, right, come into play, and this is why I feel like there need to be more dialogue and getting differently trained people into the public school system. When my first son was very young, he went to a private school basically because that was the closest school to where I was working, and it was just easier for me to pick him up from there. So he spent I think up until class 1 in a private school, and their method of teaching was Montessori. I think that's what it's called, right? We don't see a lot of that in our public schools, our public school systems. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So and I'm not just saying that that's the only method, but there are a number of different methods basically that we can introduce, but we have to have the trained teachers. We focus on one method of teaching. You come to class, when you sit down, you look at the board, you write it off, you remember. Mm-hmm. And if you don't remember, you don't see.
Oh Lord.
But isn't that it though? I mean, that's kind of raw, but isn't that it? Yeah.
Retention, right? Yeah. Retention, yeah. And if you're not retaining properly, then you're considered not to be brave. So exactly. That's certainly a problem.
And not just retention, but retention in a specific space of time.
Precisely. I was just about to get to that, because one of the interesting things is that it's not only the place the person comes from and the teachers and what's not, but it's certainly also what they are learning. I also find that the amount of work that you're piling onto 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, I'm questioning whether or not it makes sense within this context. Because first of all, you're telling persons if they do not know A, B, and C by 16 years old, as I always said, you're not intelligent. And then you have to question whether or not your life is going to be determined at 16. It's a very strange concept, because we're going to be telling persons, okay, you need to go on to community college, you need to go on to university, you need to go on and do these various things. So then why at the same time are we saying that if you don't do well at 16, your life has been determined and you're not smart if you don't come up with 18 CXCs essentially? So those are some of the things that we have to consider. We have to start making the curriculum fun. One of the things that I found when I was teaching at the secondary level, even for me, it was not very enjoyable to teach what I consider to be a very archaic curriculum. And then the students were not enjoying it either, even though you were trying your best to put forward various teaching approaches, the content itself was problematic. So maybe we need to get the basics in place, ensure that school is a lot more fun. So if you want to talk about diversity, look at music, for instance. Why are we teaching students the notes and all of this technical aspect when it comes to music, when we could be teaching them maybe from experience, maybe giving them their own space to come up with their own areas and come up with their own music and everything else, something that they themselves would enjoy. And then the heavy theory and difficult stuff can come at a later stage when they're more mature, when they're more disciplined, when they have more exposure, when they have just lessons in life. Because a lot of the things that we seem not to recognize is that you're talking to 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds, who have no real experiences in life, who don't understand so many things beyond academia in life. And I think one of the smartest things that I've done, personally, again, I always reflect back to my personal experience, was starting college later, was starting university later, because it had a level of discipline on me and a level of exposure that I think younger individuals might not have had, that I think assisted me going forward. So these are some of the things we have to consider when we're talking about education as well, not just the work itself, but also the personal aspects.
Yeah. I totally agree with you on that aspect. And this is something that I find myself as a person who also entered university later than teenage years, that I have to have with some of my friends in my age group and stuff. They're like, we go to school too. You always reading, or you always. I would do it, but my head, and I'm too old for this and that kind of thing. And I try to explain to them that really and truly, this is the time for you to go to school. But I think it also comes from the point that some of these people have been told from day one that they're not smart. Do you understand? And so they get into whatever job they're doing. There's nothing wrong with anybody's job. Let me put that out there. You understand? But the idea that they get into the job that they're doing and so forth, and then it's very difficult when you have bills and you have children and all these things now to go back to school, and people don't even understand how difficult that is. And part of the difficulty of it comes from the way in which we are expected to learn. The amount of classes you're expected to attend face to face. I mean, COVID really and truly has knocked a lot of this out of the window. But generally speaking, I remember you remember me at UWI with my children in the classroom, right, Devaron? Because I had to bring them. They had to sit down and breastfeed in the classroom. That's the only way I could come to class. And thankfully, we have that type of system here where I was able to do that. So that's some of the things that I think. And I lost my train of thought on the question I was answering. So I'm just gonna go to one of the comments from the audience. And Sasha is saying here that I remember when zoning was first introduced, my teacher was especially upset because the schools in my zone were not viewed as good enough. And as a child, I took that on because adults were saying, well, no, this is not a good enough school for you, but just put them down on the farm. You won't be going there. And I was so terrified of being sent to any of these schools because I was made to feel that if I did, my life was ruined. So I think Ayo makes a good point on at it forcing all schools to be allocated the same resources and attention, etc. Right, and that's exactly the point that I was making. How teachers can become what do you call it? The what's the term that sociologists use when you constantly tell children something and they end up believing it?
Reinforce.
Reinforce. No, there's a specific term for it, and I'll remember it before this show is done. But if you constantly tell a child something, that's what they internalize, and that's what they become.
You're going to imprint on them, yes. Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Self-fulfilling prophecy. Right? And I think that a lot of adults right now in Barbados are still suffering with this, especially when it comes to educational system, because they're literally internalized. They believe that they're great schools and they're bad schools. They're only great schools and they're only so-called bad schools because we believe that they exist and we designed our system that way, and we're the persons who literally have to correct. That's how I feel about it. I was feeling really good about my son here recently, about his teacher. I mean, I from the time I met her, I thought she was a great teacher because she's always very encouraging. And he came home the other day and he was skipping and hopping and community halls. Like, you very happy around? You looking to give me trouble now? Anyway, so he comes in and he's like, Mommy, my teacher said to me today that I am very good at math and I can probably get 100% in the 11 plus. And I was like, okay, well, that don't mean it can happen. You have to literally work at it to make it happen, right? But I just thought that was really cool that a teacher is putting that in his head at that age. He's 10 years old, that he can get 100% 11 plus. I do math enough to run my business. Right? I'm terrible at math because I've always had terrible math teachers.
Well, you're not that bad at math. You think you're bad at math.
I'm not that bad at math. I just know I'm not a genius at math. I get the work done and I get the money counted, yeah? But sometimes I find myself stuck and I can't move forward. I'm just trying to work out VAT or something. And I just get a complete blank and I can't move forward on it. Like, and sometimes I'm not ashamed. I pick up the phone and call somebody, what's the VAT for this or something? Because in the essence of time. Or I just Google it and get a VAT calculator or something if I'm close to a computer and just work it out. Because I'm going to get serious blocks. I know where it comes back from. It comes back from my math teachers. I was so angry with myself when I realized how easy stats was at university, and that's because the last person I went with actually happened to be Jeremy Stevens, who like he just simplified it, and I mean stats was nothing, but every
We did
single
stats together, so yes, Jeremy did an
remember,
excellent job.
yeah, he
Yes.
did an excellent job, and simply I could not believe that that's the thing that was beating me. It was nothing, but it comes down to the teacher, because if you come into class and you make it sound like this archaic language that only certain people are supposed to know. You know, me, I'm not certain people, I'm just me. So, you know, and I think I think teachers play, has such a huge role in, really, and I'm really talking about the point that Sasha made and how the adults made her feel about the schools, right? And teachers and adults and everybody else, they play such a great role. And this is why, like, there's some things that I don't want the government to have referendum on. I know I'm only one person and I can't dictate this stuff, but I really don't want the government to have, this is one of the things, along with same-sex unions. And so I don't want referendum on this. I want the government to just do it because it's the right thing to do. And
Yes,
I think that the country will only see the implications of these things implemented after they see the results later. And something just have to not force things on the people, but just govern, just do it.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is that we're using an educational system in a competitive way when it really should be a collective. Because, you know, we're talking about the teachers, but you also have to look at the fact that at the end of the day, it's 6 hours at a secondary school and a primary school, really 5 hours because you have lunch. That means that you're endless hours, whereas the student rather, could be learning. And what is the infrastructure around them when they're not at school? So we have a circumstance where our socioeconomic situation is one where there are many single parent households where parents work a long period. We now have to start looking at how the collective, and that being a community now, can build itself around students and young students who are particularly in a disadvantaged position. So I remember there were reading clinics at the secondary school, for instance. How do we bring that at the community level? Is there a space that we can have reading clinics? Is there a space that we can have some level of, you know, social extracurricular activity, music, dance, cricket, whatever you may choose? Is there a space, and are there individuals who can lend their time and their efforts and their expertise around students and young individuals in a mentorship and a collective way to ensure that they're, you know, may not be masters at math at the end, but they have some level of discipline, they have some level of value, they have some level of, you know, civic mindedness that may help them going forward.
Definitely. Yeah, Terry?
I agree. Right? So I can't say I disagree with you guys. If I must add a couple points to that, so I just need to pick up on what Devaron just said with regards to, you know, we already have asymmetry in resources behind students from the household. What is the point of our education system reinforcing that by creating further asymmetries in access to resources at a secondary school level? We need to, at that level, to use a term that's become very popular in Barbados in recent times, level the playing field, right? At least at the at the secondary school level, and perhaps, you know, allocating students to secondary schools based on zoning, and thereby properly resourcing each of these schools. You know, maybe that can help to ameliorate some of the problems that we have. We know that we're going to have to do more than that to support students who find themselves in socially disadvantaged conditions. We know we have to do more, but at least our educational system should not be reinforcing these asymmetries that are prevalent in our society that we need to try to deal with. So I agree again. Also on the point of education, so there's a question concerning how can we deepen access to tertiary level and promote entrepreneurship. So how can we deepen access? So beyond, say, the primary and secondary levels, how can we deepen access to tertiary level education? And when we think about the reform of our educational system beyond, say, removing 11 plus and moving towards, say, a more zone, okay, we for the most part agree. We have to think about the implications, but we for the most part agree. What about reform beyond, say, primary and secondary school? what about reform at the tertiary level so as to ensure that we broaden the access base? We know that we have seen a resumption of free tertiary level education in Barbados. This is an excellent thing. Last week, a prominent member of the Democratic Party was here, and he says, it's a good thing and it's water under the bridge. But we'll have that debate, I guess, further to hold them to account, right? But yes, so what reforms do we need to put in place at the tertiary level so as to ensure that we have deepen the access to tertiary level education, and what role then can we hope education, tertiary level education and beyond can play in promoting greater levels of entrepreneurship and increasing the amount of entrepreneurs that we have on island?
Okay, is that Devaron?
I guess I can jump in here. I think one of the areas that we can look at is not so much access, but what you're being afforded while you're there. So I think that's one of the important things of the open campus now, for instance. So I don't think there's particularly a huge problem as it relates to access to the management and the law and the political science and the stuff that you would get at Cape Phil. But then there are individuals who now want to go into other areas, whether it be some level of real estate, for instance. It may be vocational training, for instance. It may be something that has a very niche-like nature that does not really reflect what Cape Phil may offer you. And I think the open campus is really where we should be placing some of our attention as it relates to that access question and making education not so much theoretical, not like it's a bad thing, but something that can appeal to everyone. And I think the open campus has begun that process, and they also have obviously the vocational schools as well and the technical schools. So I think we need to start putting some focus and some financing and some just resources in those areas so that persons can see, hey, wait a minute, there is actually room for me to do something other than what Cape Phil has to offer. Not downplaying Cape Phil or anything, but certainly, just broadening what we have.
Tertiary level beyond. I guess when I think about tertiary level education, I'm speaking broadly beyond just Cape Phil. I was making the jab at Democratic Party just because. Go ahead, Ayo.
Oh, yeah, I agree with Devaron on that. Surprisingly, we agree a lot today, Devaron. This is getting strange, but anyway. But yeah, I think that one of the more critical things that Devaron also said was, after you do a lot of the studies in the areas that you want to go into, then and you want to open your business, people like to say, well, a lot of businesses in Barbados fail, a lot of Black businesses in Barbados fail. Majority of the Black people who start businesses, and of course they fail. Of course they fail. You have and I said this earlier, you have a set of people, not on this show, sorry, but we have a set of people who don't have access to capital, who don't have access to funding, I can talk about some experiences. It's very difficult to get a business loan in Barbados. They will offer you a car loan, and people say this all the time. And people don't say that because it's something to say. People say it because it's the truth. You can imagine going to a bank one week for a business loan and be denied, but then getting a call that they can offer you a car loan. These real things that happen in Barbados. You understand where I'm coming from? So people don't get, Black businesses don't fail because the people aren't knowledgeable. They don't fail because, well, not all the time, I should say, because they are outliers, and maybe the outliers are a little bit more than simply outliers. So it does happen, but a lot of time is literally because the lack of support, and that support is generally economic support. It helps though when there are avenues set up where people can learn a little bit more on how to not just perform the duties that they want to perform within the business, but also the business of running the business. Do you understand where I'm coming from? And a part of that, I think, though, should be making linkages between those people and the organizations or the people who can actually help them to move their businesses forward. I think that's one of the things that's like severely lacking in Barbados. I hardly attend networking sessions anymore because they're generally a waste of time. When people invite you to it almost literally a waste of time, because I don't know if people put enough focus on inviting the right people to the networking sessions, so that the entrepreneurs basically can, and I don't want to sound as though these things shouldn't happen, but I'm trying to figure out, or I'm yet to realize how much these networking sessions do for business people. And this is not for entrepreneurs. This is not to say that they're not success stories and that some people don't get, even myself, don't benefit from these sessions. But a lot of times it literally takes up a lot of your time, but the rewards are very little. And I would like to see a space where networking sessions really are designed in such a way that the right people are put in the same room with these entrepreneurs, but not just put in the room, but put in the room with a plan on how they're going to assist these entrepreneurs and the resources that these entrepreneurs are really looking for. And not necessarily just money. Sometimes it's just access, or sometimes it's just, whatever else. Do you understand? That these entrepreneurs are looking for. But yeah, I know that's straight a little bit from the education, what we consider to be education. But to me, that's part of the education of being an entrepreneur. Education takes place at many different levels.
No, the question spoke to education and in an effort to promote entrepreneurship. So you're right on point. Right?
Okay. Lovely.
As usual, right?
As usual.
Yeah. All right. So here, I guess I have I give my take. So of course we have the university. But if I just focus on the University of West Indies, because I know that about that institution the most. But of course, with regards to tertiary level, we have the Polytechnic. We have a whole host of other institutions that help to promote education beyond, say, secondary levels. If I'm thinking about access to it, with regards to university and these other institutions, I guess the question there surrounds how do we ensure that individuals who are at that stage in life, so post-secondary school, how do we ensure that they have the skills and the requirements, prerequisites to enter these institutions? What systems, what policies, what institutions are currently in place to ensure that our people can have access to these institutions? So this is the question that surrounds access. Yes, we have free tertiary level education at the University of West Indies and beyond, but not everyone is, I guess, qualified, or I should say credentialed to get in. So how do we ensure that we reform the education system in such a way that we can address that issue that we might be facing or that we could face? And also beyond that, as individuals or at these institutions, how do we think about the curriculum? How do we think about the pedagogy that is put over there? How do we think about what's taught at the institution? How do we think about reforming it in such a way that we can better inculcate skills necessary for entrepreneurship? I mean, at the Polytechnic, this is probably easy because most of what's taught there is geared towards the market, right? It's geared towards business. You're taught to be various things. You come up with skills in electrical engineering, for instance, right? You come up with these hard skills that you can easily apply in the market. At other institutions, this may not be the case. When we think about reforming education, how do we take that into consideration? Are we going to be reforming with the view to be more skills-based so as to promote entrepreneurship, or do we want education to be a little bit more theoretical?
Go ahead, Devaron.
Sorry, I was muted. I would think that it would have to be both, because both of them are certainly important. But I would caution against just looking at whether or not it's theoretical or whether or not it's more practical, and look at it more holistically. One of the things that I've experienced doing, I think it was a survey I was doing for someone a couple of years ago, is that one of the problems with access to education is actually work. a lot of persons are not afforded the time off from work to access education. And when they are, there is a culture within the workplace that does not facilitate it. So the boss may be on your case about it. They may reduce your pay. There's just the wrong culture when it comes to blending the work atmosphere with the educational atmosphere and some of the difficulties that persons may face. So we may have to look at it holistically, where you may want to look at labor law. For instance, we're heading in a direction where we have paternity leave for men. We're heading in a direction where we have all kind of progressive things now for individuals. Maybe we have to start looking at labor on education, whether or not you allow individuals to access education while still working and making it easier to do that. I think that's one of the issues that we certainly face.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Devaron, because you're now moving into an environment where continuing professional development and lifelong learning. University of West Indies has a center for this, continuing professional development, lifelong learning. It would be nice to have employers on board to encourage and, in fact, sponsor in some instances their staff in engaging with institutions like this, and so as to make sure they're keep themselves equipped and have the skills necessary to be as productive as they can be as we move into a world post-COVID that's going to be very heavily skewed towards technology. I mean, we're here on Zoom, and who knows we could be broadcasting like on Zoom, right? I certainly didn't before.
We still almost don't, but that's okay.
Yes. I mean, yeah. So I mean, we're moving into a world where practical skills, and still having the theoretical knowledge and underpinning of how certain ideas should be functioning in terms of how these ideas are put into practice. This is still going to be important. So I agree with you that both technical in terms of the practical aspects of things and theoretical in terms of how these practical things are actually derived, those remain important aspects of education. And yes, we do need to encourage us somehow a culture, try to inculcate a culture of continuing development of and lifelong learning. And if it is possible to have our government institute policies, legislation to support this will be very, I guess, helpful. Any ideas, Ayo, or any feedback on that?
What was it? The exact question again?
Right. So the question revolved around access, right? So the question revolved around access, and it also revolved around whether we should be focusing on reforms more geared towards practical skills, or reforms that are away from more theoretical aspects of education right now. So that was the main.
Okay. That's the main question. Okay, got you. Yeah, I honestly think that for me, in a pure utopia,
You're idealist.
Sometimes
No, all the time.
People should basically study what they want. Of course, when it comes to the running of a government and the running of a country, really, we need there's a necessity to have people in certain specific areas. I'm somewhat skeptical though on if that is really a problem, and I've thought about this for some time, and I'm of the opinion that if you need people to be masons, basically you make masonry attractive. You understand where I'm coming from? So we have a situation where we have so many people basically becoming lawyers. My friend here, what's his name, Arthur, he likes to say that there are too many lawyers in Barbados, right? And we need to produce less lawyers, fewer lawyers, really, and blah blah blah. And he's always on the lawyers, right, Arthur? But I mean, if you want to study law and you think you can make money from law, to my mind, then go do law. You understand? If you want, if as a state, you want people in a particular area, then you make that area attractive. There are people who generally like suing. There are people who generally like artistic endeavors that has absolutely nothing to do, or have absolutely nothing to do with the general or what is considered to be academia, because I see what I think people like me see, that there is a level of academia even in art, and even in all these, you know, other things that people get involved with that doesn't lead to sitting at a desk all day or at a computer. There's a level of intellectualism of these ideas, really and truly, is what I'm trying to say. So I think that I'm not one who will buy into the idea of focusing on one or focusing on the other, but basically letting people choose what they want to do and creating the society, the type of society which is that is able to basically find space for these people. Is that making sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Certainly. And Terry mentioned the government's involvement, but I wouldn't say skeptical of that. It's certainly one of the major players within our society, but I think one of the things we're missing is, again, how at the family level, at the community level, you can actually educate. I call it an intergenerational approach to education. So our parents, for instance, taught us all of the necessary things that we may need to succeed in life. Now we're going through a phase where there is a transition into a digital and a technological stage where they're not familiar with these things. But there are many young individuals who use the cell phones and who use the computers and laptops on a regular basis, who now need to be responsible culturally for retraining their parents. My mother, for instance, before she would come to me trying to, ask me how to use this thing on the cell phone, I used to be annoyed by it. Naturally, you tend to have that kind of relationship with your parents, and they come into you about something so simple. But then it struck me that, something, she is at an age where she's almost 6 years old. She needs to retool. She needs to be more familiar with technology, and she needs to bring herself into the 21st century. And I can't leave that for someone else to do when I'm living in the same house with her and I'm comfortable with these things. So culturally, we have to ensure that younger individuals who have the knowledge about these things retrain and retool their family members at the community and the family level. It doesn't even have to be government. So many basic things, the Excel, the Word, how to be the basic things that can help them and push them in that direction. We have to start looking at it culturally, how we as young people can now imprint that knowledge onto them, similarly to how they did it for us when we were growing up.
Agreed, totally agree. And I think that, I know you said that you're looking away from the government, but I think, and this is subject to correction, yeah, but I think the government launched a program recently where they were using university students to basically go into the communities or whatever and help to educate people on technology and so forth. Is this true, or am I just remembering something that didn't happen?
It is part of, I think, the Give Back program that the Ministry of Education has rolled out. But again, I don't want it to be something that is, I don't want to say forced onto you. Want it to be organic. You want to create a culture where young people understand that is their role as a young person, to re-educate your society. So it should be organic. And that's a cultural change that we need to do.
Yeah, I understand you. I think where we would differ is I like the idea of providing access, because I find a lot of times if something does not exist, then people aren't necessarily interested in it. But when it becomes available, people would say, well, there's this thing happening. I really need to learn to do this, or maybe learn to do it. But the access is there, so then people start to use it. I would agree with you, though, that as young people in our society, the type of person that I am, I do agree that we should want to be helping those persons who are affected by the digital divide, or whatever you want to call it, a lot more. But sometimes it's a little difficult because people are living their own lives. People are doing this and doing that. So it has to be a conscious decision, basically, say, you know what, I'm going to educate 10 people in how to do this, or what have you. So I like the idea of government basically saying, look, we're going to make this available. We're going to give these people access to these skills, or what have you. And then people taking up on the opportunities and making it work for them.
Makes sense.
Just want to read a comment here. I haven't read it before. I like to scan my comments before I read them out loud. but I trust Amara, so I'm just gonna read it without checking it. He's saying that many, you're right. Many young people go to SJP and come out with limited areas to work in and end up working in a job they don't like and play their trade for less as well. And that's another thing that we said about basically having the environment, because you know what these schools are teaching. We know what is happening at these schools. We know how many carpenters are coming out. We know how many masons are coming out. We know, you know, draftmen. We know all these things, and I somehow I only call in construction workers, but there's so many more types of people coming out of these institutions. Of course, there are other things that we have to look at, the economic environment and all these things. So I do understand that, but I still think that we have to do a lot more to create the environment to absorb a lot of the people who come out of these institutions.
And
Yeah.
interestingly enough, I think that sets a good segue into another discussion, which is regionalism, because you spoke about absorbing these individuals, and the question becomes whether or not within our current economic climate and our current circumstances, Barbados alone can absorb these individuals. Is there not room in other territories for them to be absorbed? And I think that is a really good segue into the regional discussion.
Yeah.
I think
I
you're
wish
right.
we can start now.
Yeah. I guess we should make that segue. Right. So
Everyone's saying, let's spend much time here.
so beyond education reform, and as we reflect on the Independence Project and consider its future, we know that we've had prominent academics like Tennyson Joseph, Dr. Tennyson Joseph, and his recent book actually makes a call for broadening our sovereign base beyond the limited island form. So we have Barbados independent island, right? Broaden it beyond this limited island form to a more historically natural and politically relevant in our current context, regional form. And I guess this is important in the context of people seeking opportunities, but also in the context of, you know, the whole COVID environment and marshaling our resources, our very scarce resources, human resources and natural resources in the context of COVID, right? So what I'd like us to discuss with regards to the regional aspect of things of the discussion tonight, what role does regionalism, or what role can regionalism play in helping us to the question that you were or to the segue that you were pointing to, provide our people with greater opportunities beyond, say, Barbados, right? Greater scope for opportunities, but also help us to better utilize our resources. What role does that play in the current context of COVID and this post-independence project that we are currently pursuing?
Well, first of all, I think that regional integration is more than just about what benefits Barbados. For me, I think that regional integration is a lot more about what benefits the Caribbean. How can we all utilize this space to the betterment of all of us, all the peoples of this particular space. So I don't like to say how does, but I know that people would answer the question or answer the question in that way. How does it benefit Barbados? And I think that if we set up the systems to benefit the region, then as a result, Barbados itself benefits also, right? You were asking, the original question was, how the
question really revolved around, okay, so we know that we have these independent micro states, right? And
sorry, you guys know I'm tired and I've been going for like 15 hours, so just bear with me.
We know you had a show earlier actually, so you know you are forgiven.
Other things. So.
But yeah, so we know we have this our independent states, and in a region that is naturally and historically, in fact, one entity, right? Or can, like, in its proper form, when we conceptualize, and you're an idealist, you know, when we conceptualize our region, you know, when we think of it, some of us, and I think a lot of us, we see it as being a collective space where people, for the most part, of, you know, African descent, Portuguese, Anglo-Saxon, Native peoples where we all are together and we all have a shared culture. But we don't have this shared space really. We have CARICOM, we have some CARICOM institutions, University of West Indies being probably the most prominent one among them. So we have, and West Indies cricket, right? So we have these things, right? But we don't have that historically natural and in fact politically relevant regional state, right? So what role does the formation of that type of an entity play in when we think about the continuation of this independence project for Barbados, right? What role do we see that as the natural outcome? So we're moving from a place where Barbados is a monarchy that's independent, right? And we're moving to republicanism next. Do we see ourselves moving to a situation where we are a nation within a broader Caribbean state, right? Is that the future of the independence project?
I think that is what we as idealists would like to see. Like you like to call us idealists. I think that is what we as idealists.
You an idealist.
Right, me. So I think that is what people like me who quote unquote, and I'm not really idealist, but I have some idealistic ideas. And I think that is essentially what we would like to see. I'm more doubtful that it would actually happen.
I think. Go ahead.
I'm more doubtful because of the way in which politics is practiced within our island states. I think that it would be politically expedient for leaders of countries to and we see this all the time. I mean, I was going back through some of the manifestos from the great late Errol Walton Barrow, and he was just like going off on this nationalistic, and I don't mean the good nationalism, I mean the Janus Fizz one, the backward looking one, right? Going off on this tangent about nationalism and the St. Vincent's coming and getting Barbadian jobs, and I mean, and it was a little bit hard to read because you grow up with these ideas about who these people are, but then you see the things that you're reading, the things that they're writing, and it don't fit into the picture that you have of some of these people. So I think that when people are looking for votes, regardless of if they believe that something is right or wrong, if that's what they think the people want to hear, a lot of times that's what they sell to the people. Yeah. And then when they win the elections, of course, they have to hold themselves firm to some of these things. It's a little difficult, although some do it, it's a little difficult to come and say, well, I tell you all in platform that they just come in here and carry on with the jobs. But I think that we should integrate with Barbados because the best thing for us to do as a region, or Barbados saying that about something else or about another island. So I think that that's one thing. That's the main thing I think that would. Oh, and we saw it happen. I don't have to tell you about this. Y'all know the history of the Federation and the little 8 and the and the big 8 or whoever. The big 3 and everything else. Y'all know this history, so we know how political expediency charts the decision and the future for the region, or have charted it. Yeah. But ideally, and I use that word loosely, ideally an integrated Caribbean space is where we should be moving towards in more ways than one. I'm still at a loss of why Barbados is not a part of the which one is it? I know we're in the OECS. We're not in the, what's the other one? The OAS? What's it?
CS? I think we're part of that one.
The Organization of American States. We are part of the Organization of American States, the OAS.
We are. There's one that we are not a part of that is made up. And anyhow, it come back to me. And my brain is tired. Like I can tell you, they've been on for 15 hours straight. And I'm just losing a lot of it right now. Just getting through this show. But,
interestingly enough,
go ahead.
Terry had asked whether or not the integration project is the next stage of our independence project. And I would have to say yes, because fundamentally our independence was built around development. And I think there has been sufficient evidence and work done that shows integration now is really the next stage of our development. You broaden your markets, you have a larger population, you have more resources, you have more power in the international arena. So the theory is there, the practice is there. So
theory.
Certainly, but yeah, well, no, the practice is there too as well, certainly. But I pointed to.
In fairness, yeah.
Yeah, I pointed to, I think, a very important discussion. And again, it points to the issue of competition at the national level. One of the reasons that we have a faltering integration system is because not only of expedience, but political structures. We have a circumstance where you have a parliamentary system that's built around divisiveness and competition. So when you have a government that is engaging at the regional level, the opposition has no voice in that discussion. So naturally then regionalism becomes an oppositional strong suit in a sense. So everything the opposition does essentially is in many ways against the government. If the government takes up a position of regionalism, the natural inclination of the opposition is to oppose it. And it's that structure of competition and division that I think contributes to it. And one of the things we also have to recognize is the level of political turnover. I think there were about 23 changes of government over the last 20 years. So now you find yourself in a situation where oppositions become governments and they've not been a part of that regional integration discussion. They've not been at the table. So they come now not only ignorant, but also there's a level of divisiveness and animosity rather towards the project because it's seen as the other people's project. We're not taking this on. This was something from the last government. And you have a lot of these things going on. You had an instance where Prime Minister became elected at the national level and naturally became the head of the CARICOM system. He had to ask, what is CARICOM? Because him in opposition, he had no involvement in the CARICOM discussion. He had no involvement of what goes on at the national level and how they engage CARICOM, and therefore that level of division at the domestic level therefore puts itself into the regional level as well. That's one of the things we have to consider.
Yeah, I hear both yourself and Ayo on this point of the politics, but I don't know that necessarily precludes us from moving forward. I guess with more time as we get governments and oppositions to buy in. So I mean, we can see case in point the recent move towards republicanism or Republican status or Republic status, sorry, in Barbados. We have a situation where the Barbados party in government supported it or mooted that, you know, they'll have a referendum on it. This is years ago, probably a little bit before your time, everyone, right? but they definitely mooted it as well. and then the Democratic Party came into office again. You know, they said, you know, we're going to become a republic, and that was an issue at that point in time. The Barbados Party in opposition had nothing to say about that, and now we have the Barbados Party in government again, now taking the country into its new status as a republic next year. So perhaps time and allowing the opposition to, I guess, buy in, and with this natural turnover, and help to address some of these issues with regards to this whole adversarial contestation and the politicizing of our regional efforts. Perhaps with time, given enough exposure from the various parties to what regionalism is about, what is going to be, what it augurs for the future of our community, perhaps we can have this broader buy-in.
I think it's a project that has to be left or may have to be left for younger generations, probably like 2 generations away from the current.
I don't like to think that. I think that our generation to be able to push
right,
that.
But not this generation. I mean the current generation of leaders in the region throughout. I have a lot of hope for the future because of how younger people are engaging right now. And the ideas that are coming out of the younger people. They have a lot of hope, and that's younger people like myself.
You're young.
I have a lot of hope for the future because of the ideas that I'm hearing coming out. And I think that our world is going to change. This space is going to change dramatically in another 20 years or so.
It already has changed. COVID.
There are a lot of things that, there are a lot of things that I like about what this current government is doing right now. And I'm going to move off of regionalism a little bit, unless you want to continue.
Well, I guess we have a couple more things that we could possibly say.
Okay, right. Okay, so I will move now. Keep that thought for later then.
No, go ahead. We always, come back. Go
We
ahead.
come back to that.
Mhm.
All right. Because I feel like, and people say that the government is really spending a lot of time on the optics and so forth, right? And I will agree that there is some um, incidences of some things being, for the optics. It is politics, yeah. But there are a lot of things. There are a few things that has been happening that I feel is important to um, the psyche of the people of the state. I hate using that word because some people feel, oh, so you want to brainwash people, right? But no, that's not the case. I think that imagery and symbolism are important. I mean, we're Africans at the end of the day, and this is a part of our DNA, right? We are people who like imagery and we like symbolism. That's who we are. I don't have to elaborate on the nearly 50-year conversation that this state has had on whether Nelson should be removed or not. Right? I mean, come on, we spent 50 years debating whether some person who who he is should be removed from our capital, us being who we are. Right? That's indicative to a sort of people so in love with the images basically that's being foisted upon them that they can't even step away from them. And there's something very serious about that, right? And we laugh and we joke about it and we're like, these people can't be serious, but it's just like a and I don't want to sound too critical of people because people are who they are and they grew up in the times that they grew up in, yeah. But I think that removing him was a battle that was won not just for the people who understood how he should be won, but also the people who don't understand, and then the generations to come after. I'm so glad my children don't have to grow up in a world where we have Nelson sitting in quote unquote Trafalgar Square. You understand? Because people still insist on calling it a Trafalgar Square and they do that on purpose. You understand where I'm coming from? But some people argue that this move will do nothing to solve the problems that exist, and they're really talking about the physical problems that exist in our society. But I don't think that they make the connection, right, between symbolism, how you see yourself as a people, and any decisions that you take because of how you see yourself as a people.
Yeah. I think, well, the theme of symbolism. Symbolism is important, and it's important for us to discuss in the context of, the broader topic that we're talking about, independence and where we go from here, right? So we've talked about education, we talked about regionalism. I don't know, Devaron, if you have any closing remarks on regionalism before we move on to discuss more wholeheartedly this whole idea, the importance of symbolism for our future and our independence.
Well, the only thing that I would add to the regionalism discussion again is one of the issues again is the representation and how we see representation. When we speak about regionalism and integrating, it is the people who are being affected, yet it's not the people who are brought at the discussion table. Where is the unions? Where is the civil society? Where is the private sector? Are these people involved at the regional level insofar as it could be to ensure that this regionalism process works? It can't just be heads of government and academia and what's not. It has to be the people who it's going to affect and hearing what they have to say and what they have to put forward and bring that level of input at that level. And that's partly symbolic as well too, because you're showing that we see you symbolically as part of this movement and we want you to be involved. As Ayo said, the symbolism has an impact on how you behave going forward. So if you see yourself as the collective, then bring the collective.
Yeah, I agree. And in closing on that theme, for me, I'm reminded of a quote from Herman Smith, a chancellor of Germany, who once said that, West Germany, France, and the UK were too small. These were too small in order to make it in the long run on their own. They had to come together. Now, who are we in the Caribbean? Very small states. We never fought any 100-year wars with each other. We didn't have any First and Second World Wars with each other. We're culturally pretty much the same. We speak the same language. We have a lot of things in common. Why do we think that we can make it alone when countries such as the UK, I mean, we've had Brexit, so they think they can go alone, but I think this is a mistake. Certainly Germany and definitely France, they don't believe that they can make it for the long run alone. Why do we think otherwise? Right, so that's something for us to think about. So moving on to the whole idea of symbolism. Yeah, I mean, research suggests that symbolism is important. Symbols are important, if not at the conscious level, certainly at the subconscious level, in trying to build a sense of nationalism and belonging in society. And if we are to move around our environment and see symbols that connote to or that speak to a time when we had European hegemony and European overlordship over our region and over our country, then what does that say for us, right? I mean, yes, the history is there. We'll always have that history, but the symbols that we have in our public spaces and in such a prominent public space, such as the entrance essentially to the seat of power in Barbados, I don't think Nelson should have been there.
I know that we've got rid of Nelson. I think that is important. That and that we and I just remember I had this thing to share on this show and I forgot. There's a huge stamp in town that was done by some local artists here, Barbadian stamp. Because I was just making the point that now we've got rid of Nelson, we need to put forth more images of our country that speaks about what our country really is. I mean, look, yes, we use bedpans and we use joking boards, right? But I mean, there's so much more to Barbados than this. And I really hate the idea that whenever we talk about putting forth some images of Barbados, like this is where we go to. You understand where I'm coming from? And we start talking about the poor and when they say poor, I mean the bedpan, toxie, or whatever we call it. And we go to, I mean, there's so much more that's happening in Barbados. There's so much more that's indigenous to Barbados. There's so much more that's produced of Barbados every day, right? That we can put forth. And I want to see us go to a time and a space where we can, I mean, thinking about what is Barbadian, that's not where we go to automatically. Am I making sense?
Certainly.
Sometimes I get trapped in my head on my ideas, but y'all following what I'm saying here?
For the most part, yes.
Yeah, good, right? So, I mean, so now that we removed Nelson, and I said this before on a previous show, I want to see a woman named Bridgestone, right? I want to see a woman in Bridgestone. It is time for a woman to be in Bridgestone. It is time that we have a woman statue on this island, and the best place to place her is in the capital. I was listening to I think it was the People's Business some weeks back, and it was Trevor Marshall on the program, and Trevor Marshall said, look, we need to put a woman here. And the reason we need to put a woman here is because this is the spot where African women and African young girls were prodded and finger raped, and use that word loosely, but that's what it is, and sold in this spot. This is where inhumane things happened to women in this spot, on this island. Do you understand? So the most fitting thing to do is to create a composite statue. This is what he was suggesting, of women, and place it here in recognition of the women who went through those ordeals in this spot. And I remember that the men in the program basically just shrugged it off, and they went on to continue to suggest suitable men to place in the spot. And that's one of the problems that I have a difficulty with. You understand where I'm coming from? And I thought that was such a extremely good suggestion by Mr. Marshall, and one that should not have been ignored. And I really hope that the powers that be are listening to him and taking out him on that suggestion and that advice. But the point I'm making is that not just in that spot, but throughout Barbados, we need to and we started the project. I think this government has started the project really well. We're not getting a statue of Westall, but we want a little bit more than statues of people, you know what I mean? There must be other things that we can do rather than just erect statues too.
Yes,
so
yes.
that I think that's where I'm right now.
Yeah,
and it has.
Go ahead, Deborah.
It has to be I don't want to say more than symbolism because that diminishes the importance of symbolism. But symbolism is the acknowledgement that change is necessary and that you acknowledge change. And that is the first step. And let's use that now as a catalyst where we can now begin to institute things in our daily lives, politically, economically, socially, culturally, and everything else that impacts on daily lives, and recognize that, wait a minute, Nelson is just the beginning. What now can we do, and how can we use his removal and the thought process around his removal to ensure that we put practical things in place now to better people's financial welfare, socioeconomic welfare, political welfare. And I think it's that catalyst that I think is important going forward. So it's an excellent agenda, but it must galvanize around why we wanted it removed to begin with and go further in that direction.
Agreed.
And I agree with you, because sometimes people do get stuck in the symbolism of the entire thing, and that's where it becomes just optics, because what are you doing next? You know what I mean? Okay, so yes, we placed a woman in Bridgetown, but after that, what focus are you bringing to the issues that affect women? Are you changing the laws a little bit more so that women who are abused in the home, for instance, physical abuse and so forth, domestic abuse and what have you, you know what I mean? That those things are dealt with in faster ways, one, and in better ways where those women don't face another set of abuse in the court. You know, do you understand where I'm coming from? So, Devaron, I am 100% with you right now. 100% on that. It can't just stick at the symbolism of the entire thing. Sorry, you know, I get passionate sometimes about something that I feel anyway. And I'm tired.
I don't agree with everything anyone says, except for me, right? so, just kidding. I agree with you as well. I agree with you as well, everyone. And back to your earlier point, or well, on the same theme, but the point that you were making, Ayo, of course, I think, when we think about, I'm going to pick up on the whole idea that a woman should go there. Yeah, I think a woman should go there. And I think the remark made by the historian surely should have impact, because maybe the gentlemen who were discussing it, or the men, didn't understand the point he was making or understand the history of that place and that space, right? And so perhaps, or if our decision makers come to know of the history, come to understand that, yes, this is a place where a lot of our forefathers and foremothers and forefathers were sold. And slavery, we've had this discussion off air, but slavery, we're quite sure, was probably a very peculiar female experience, right? And this is something that obviously resonates with us as descendants of Black people and formerly enslaved people. That we want to see a woman go there, and perhaps a statue that speaks to that experience would be appropriate. Beyond that, perhaps our first female governor would be appropriate. Some people say Rihanna, right? So we want to have some woman there. I think I can support that. We do not have. We look around Barbados and we look at.
I'm not getting vexed if they put Rihanna there at all.
Me neither, right? We look at the people who we have memorialized in the form of statues. I really can't think of a female statue anywhere in place prominent in Barbados. So we really need to fix that, because again, on the point of symbolism is important, and it's all right. And yes,
exactly. And you are telling women of this country how important they are to the state.
Let me finish, Ayo. Right? so yes, they are important in this day, and yes, symbolism is important, like you said. Coming to the point that you made, Devaron, about the material, yes, symbolism is important in its own right, because as Ayo just quite correctly said, and I'm put in there, that you're telling women that they're important to the state, and of course, our women are incredibly important to our state and our future. They are the future, really. So beyond just
what I was actually saying is that the idea that there are no statues of women on island, right, is saying to the women how important they aren't to the state.
Right. Okay. Well, I don't know. We don't have any, but I can't think of any.
I can't think of one.
So
One.
that's
Problematic.
yeah,
If there is
Yeah.
one and we can't name one, that's problematic because where is
Yeah.
she hidden?
And
right.
it's really a form of what I would consider remedial justice as well too, and recognizing that women have been the backbone of development in many ways
Mhm.
for our territories, and I don't want to limit it to one statue. We could have a host of statues in many places because there are many groups in our society that require that remedial justice, whether it's the Rastafarian community and how they've been treated in the past, whether it's the LGBT community, whether it's women and other marginalized groups within our society. We need to start symbolizing the importance of these people. I remembered I was having a discussion with someone just so long ago. They had asked me about a particular senator that was in the Senate, I believe, in 2008 or something like that. And the social outrage that they had because the person had braided hair. And that was only 10, how long, 10 years ago?
I remember that. Yeah, it was
Precisely. So imagine now in the 90s and the 80s what Rastafarians had to face because of their locks and the ideas around them and their cultures and various other things. So there's so many persons and groups within our society who are marginalized culturally, who are marginalized economically, who are marginalized socially, politically. And these individuals know how to come to the forefront because they too are contributors to our development and to the sustainability of our society. So why do we not go in the direction of highlighting these individuals? I cannot disagree.
yeah, yeah. And I guess the point I wanted to move on towards, like to come to your point about the material. Yeah, symbolism is important in its own right, but we can't just stay there. We have to move on to the material aspect. So if we say that we care about women and we now venerate them in the form of statues, what are we doing now concerning women's issues in our society? What laws are we putting in place to better protect them? I know a lot of men groups are out there saying, the courts are in favor of the women, but that's not true. We know that if you actually look at the laws, a lot of the laws are not necessarily in favor of women. The courts may be in favor of children, and if males allow or males do not live up to their responsibilities with regards to being primary caregivers with regards to the children, then they'll suffer the consequences in the court. But the courts are not there just for the interest of women. So we know that's not the case. What are we doing in the material sense with regards to, say, women, broader issues surrounding all of our people, the masses of the society? What are we doing to ensure that as we move into, the future, and as we deepen our independence project, as we expand, and in all these regards, what are we doing to ensure that the new symbols that we put up and are also reflected in the policies and the material aspects of the state? All right, I guess that was more a statement than a question. All right, so next, so the next theme, I guess we should probably discuss before it gets too late. How are we doing for time? Are there any questions online, Ayo?
Okay, sorry. All right, so I'm gonna read going back up. So if I answer somebody else's question before yours, I'll get to you. All right. So Anderson Cave is asking, has our region as an organically developed civilization done enough on a developmental scale to stand alone apart post-colonial times? Our culture, our economies, our educational structures, our politics, our generational planning, our psyches, can they all stand alone?
Arthur, what was Anderson? What's the guy's name?
Anderson.
So there's this, I don't know if you can see it, there's this book by one of our favorite people, Honorable Ralph Gonzalez. The first essay he has in this book, the book is Our Caribbean Civilization and Its Political Prospects. Give that a read, because for sure, while we are an offshoot of Western civilization, we have in our own right developed in a unique fashion, in my view. And a lot of the themes from his first essay in that book suggest that, we are something distinct, we are a civilization of our own, and we can be recognized as such by ourselves and by others.
You're finished?
Yeah.
Okay.
The book again is Our Caribbean Civilization and Its Political Prospects. These are just 3 essays by Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonzalez, Prime Minister Gibson and the Grenadines. Give the first essay a read, and he outlines, the first essay is entitled Our Caribbean Civilization and Its Political Prospects. So it's entitled the title of the book, and it kind of reflects, it makes an argument, it recites an argument that suggests that we are, and we can be seen as something distinct and unique with regards to us being a civilization in our space.
Sometimes if you really sit down and try to imagine a Caribbean space that is one space with, let's say, ferries and it's funny because we're talking about this as though it is something that we should be moving towards, but it's actually something we moved away from, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of times when we're talking about Caribbean integration, we're talking about something that we should be moving towards. It's something that we moved away. I'm old enough to remember the Windward, right? I'm old enough to remember people traveling down through the islands on Windward and buying stuff and coming back. You understand where you're coming from? And it was a natural and normal thing. It was a natural and normal thing growing up to hear Vincent's voice, to hear Ghanai's voice. It was a natural and normal thing. I think I remember going down to Trinidad. I don't know if I should be saying this, no, but I remember going to Trinidad for a weekend and just staying at the airport and coming back home because you don't want to pay for the hotel. You understand where I'm coming from?
People do.
I mean, it was easy, but you can't do it. No, but it was a very simple thing to travel through the region, and I mean, it was $100 for a ticket or some kind of foolish money. But like, it is like crazy to think that you spend sometimes $1,500, $2,400 and stuff to go next door. It don't make sense. If you really think about these things, it don't really make sense.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about Caribbean integration, we're not talking about something that we moving towards. We're talking about something that we moved away from and we don't know how to get back to, because we've decided that each of us on our own is more than the other person, or I don't know, that may be the wrong way to put it, but we've just decided that our economies are better on their own, and this is not true. That's actually a very false concept.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, coming back to this question, have we done anything unique? Look at how we play cricket as this thing. I mean, we're playing a game that was developed in England. We're playing it not very well now, but we were the best in it, and we have our own flavor, so we have something unique. That is something that we have as a collective. Of course, we are people who are of predominantly African extraction, Portuguese, American, Anglo-Saxon. We have a whole host of people here. Again, that is something that is quite unique. The way we speak, our languages, well, the various creoles of English that we have, and other languages, French, for instance, right? Again, these are, for the most part, unique. So in our space, we have a shared culture, and I think that we could pretty much defend ourselves, or identify or recognize ourselves as being some sort of independent civilization. I'm also reminded of some words of Errol Barrow, who once said, that we are a civilization. We are a civilization. We should be recognized as such.
I think that we need to really, and maybe it would take a group of people to do that, to really imagine the Caribbean space as a united front, and it would take a set of people, not just from one island, but throughout the region, right? Really building on that idea and getting buy into that idea by the various governments around and just imagining it. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Because maybe they don't even know how to do it. Maybe they're just talking at these talk shops and stuff, but they have no idea how to do it. And I know there's something that we may think, that we may feel is inconceivable, that governments are having meetings and don't know what they're doing, but it happens because they're supposed to have the meetings. Do you understand where I'm coming from? But then there are no real ideas coming out of the meetings, no real conclusion on how to move forward on the very same things that they're supposed to be discussing. And we've seen that happen over and over again, right?
And again, it's not only at the governmental level. I like to bring things back to people, and through no fault of their own, sometimes it's difficult to appreciate and understand something you've never experienced. For instance, think about a dog or something that's never felt love. The only thing it's felt is abuse, and they will respond always negatively until they've had that experience. And the unfortunate reality is that many persons have not had a reason to move or could not afford to move in a Caribbean territory around the Caribbean. And I myself am guilty of this. I've been to the US about 10 times. The first time I've been to another Caribbean territory, I believe was in 2019. And I myself am guilty of that. Now I've had the opportunity, precisely, I had the opportunity of being at the University of West Indies and fully understanding the importance of integration and having a lot of regional friends. But what about individuals who have not had that experience? I myself have had xenophobic ideas, I believe, before I came to the University of West Indies, and that experience has changed that. But what about the individuals who have not had that? You must have a reason to move and the ability to move in order to build that understanding. One of the major things that I think has contributed so far to our regional integration project and the reduction of xenophobia is the intermingling at the procreation level between the various territories. You have no family in Trinidad. You have family in St. Lucia. You have reason to move, and they have reason to move. Precisely. So those, interestingly enough,
I'm not saying anything.
Interestingly enough, that is one of the more successful things that you don't need a government to push. You don't need an institution to push, and it's a cultural thing that we need to start thinking about.
Yeah,
on the issue of traveling, sorry.
No, go ahead, Ayo.
Yeah, on the issue of traveling though, and the reason why, like, and I get what you're saying. There are a number of Bajans right now who go to New York and Flatbush in New York and Boston and every place else, but they don't travel throughout the region, or they go down to Miami to shop or what have you. But when you consider that it costs almost the same to travel to Miami that it costs to travel to St. Lucia, I mean, it becomes obvious, right? So this is where I think, and why I believe that this is where the government need to get involved at that level and just decide, well, look, we need cheaper travel throughout the region.
Yeah, that's true. And I just want to, on the same theme, quote from National Hero of Barbados, Earl Walton Barrow, in a speech that he gave at the Miami Conference on the Caribbean in November 1986, a year and a time in Barbados that we will all remember for a long time. Because around my year of birth. So, anyway, he said this: "It is dehumanizing and false to view the Caribbean as potentially American problem. We are peoples with an identity and a culture and a history. The Parliament of Barbados will be 350 years old in 1989. We don't need lessons in democracy from anyone. Full stop. Period. However severe the economic difficulties facing the Caribbean, we are viable functioning societies with the intellectual and institutional resources to understand and grapple with our problems. Collectively, we have the resource potential necessary for our continued development, and of course, we have a heritage of exquisite natural beauty entrusted to us. The Caribbean is, after all, a civilization." So those are his words, and I think we have buy-in from both political parties in Barbados with regards to this, and we need to live up to that ideal, I think.
I agree.
All right. So I guess the last thing that we could discuss. So we've discussed education. We've taken a look at regionalism. We've talked about symbols. Last thing that we'd like to discuss in the last 10 minutes, I think, would be tourism and the economy. Ayo, I think you have a question on this. Do you remember?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do, and I do remember, because it's like mostly one of the things that I have been talking about all week in every forum. Not really, but it's being on my mind a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. So I was saying basically that I think I spoke on this earlier today too, that COVID really brought to the forefront the way that workers who proper our main driver, which we've decided is tourism, are often taken advantage of by the owners of the facilities that cater to tourists. They work long hours, they're underpaid, and they're sometimes expected, and often expected really, to perform duties outside of their job description. And this is something that we've always known. I remember when I was much younger, I was offered a job at a hotel, and I decided to pursue other employment basically because of all the stories that you'll be hearing about the things that you have to do and things that you're expected to do and how quickly you're fired if you don't comply with some of these things. These aren't things that we don't know about. Do you understand where I'm coming from? This is a part of the conversation on a daily basis. Somebody to finish work, they're laying by the shop, they're drinking a beer, and they're talking about these things. We know these things happen, right? So I think my question was, do we need as a part of our future development, especially to becoming a republic, to reassess this sector and how we basically operate within this sector, and especially with regard to the workers within the sector, because those are the most important people in the sector. Is this something that we need to think about? Y'all can answer.
Sorry.
I was looking at a comment from Douglas Trotman, who's both political parties. Well, maybe the BLP, maybe for sure the BLP, because the BLP tends to be a more regional party as compared to the Democratic Party. But I just read from Errol Barrow, so if the Democratic Party were to live up to the legacy of Errol Barrow, they will also be seen as a civilization, and there we go.
Okay.
All right. So on to your question on tourism and whether it should be attracting, how attractive it should be for young people, and for sure we need to do a better job of managing our tourism sector, making it more, I guess, widening the participation. I like your idea of including or trying to broaden the ownership of these type of institutions, like the hotels and so on, and include the workers, because the recent episode that we have in Barbados, there'd be no way that the workers, if they own the institution, that they'd be taking the decision not to pay themselves severance if they're going to be fired, right? So I don't think that would have happened. And so I think that your suggestion that we find some way of adjusting the ownership structures of these, we don't have to go full towards what would be described as socialism, right? Although Barbados is a democratic socialist country, we need to have that reflected more so in the economy, and we need to have it reflected in particular in the ownership of these institutions, because it is actually reprehensible that we can have an entity seeking to send home individuals, not pay them severance, and then lo and behold, when they come to recognize that the Barbados government is sovereign and could very easily take action against them to recoup this loss if they were to be paid out from the national insurance scheme.
Find the money magically. Magnet.
It's very upsetting, and it tells you
was upset the whole week because of it, because it really was this entity saying, look, we're not paying these people because we don't have to.
I mean, that certainly is the impression. I don't know if the impression.
Well, right, that's the impression I got. We're not paying these people because we don't have to. We don't want to, right? Even though they're deserving of it. Right. But when government say they're going to recoup the fund, then you find the funds miraculously as the people were filling out these papers. And I look, there's a point where a government has to say, look, you know what, this is foolishness, and we need to do more for our workers, and we need to be able to say, well, look, if A, Y, Z doesn't happen, then B, D, E will. You understand? Yes, we need the sector to thrive, and yes, we need people to do certain things in this country and so forth, and to invest in this country, but we can always find people who care about people to invest in the country. You understand where I'm coming from? We can always find those people, and government just have to really start cuddling these people as much as they do. That's how I feel about it. Because then everybody's on, yeah. So then sometimes when you read the comments from some of the owners of these establishments, and the main thing that they say sometimes is like, well, you know, we provide jobs, and tourism is what brings them into the country. So they almost feel as though they're doing the country a favor when the majority of the profits are actually leaving the country or going into their own private pockets or what have you. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Of course, Barbados has a natural advantage with regards to tourism, so so we're actually doing them a favor, and I think that we, as the people and the government, needs to think about how they're going to go about broadening the participation in this sector of the economy, because it's clear
Mhm.
with COVID that the people who are on the, the, the front lines to be sent home are the workers, and they need to have some stake in the entity. If you're going to dampen the economic effects for a future of say a future pandemic, God forbid, right? If we're going to dampen that, we need to, yes, think about developing sectors beyond tourism, but also think about reform in the tourism sector so that the ownership is broadened, so we have more participation in that sector, so that when the, I guess, the suites are to be shared out, that the workers can have a share, and that when calamity happens, that yes, they also suffer, but they don't suffer disproportionate relative to the owners, because it seems as though when the going is good, they don't really benefit, and when the going is not so good, they face
Yep.
serious repercussions. Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. So I totally agree, Devron.
All I would add to that is that we have to see who are the major players when it comes to the protection of workers.
Mhm.
And that would certainly be the unions, but by and large, I would say it has to be the government. And one of the issues that we face is that I don't want to call it conflict of interest, but the hotel sector is one of the major generators of wealth in Barbados. And we know that various aspects of the state, whether it be the government, whether it be bureaucracy or what's not, these are individuals that have been fraternizing with these owners of wealth for years at a private level, at a
There
public
is
level, and they have connections. And it is very difficult now to hold these individuals accountable when you have been under their patronage for such a long period of time. And that is something that's missing from the discussion. These are individuals that were just implanted into Barbados out of nowhere. They have connections within the persons, or with the persons rather, who are responsible now for holding them accountable. And that's what it would add to that discussion. It's very difficult now to do that if you've been, fraternizing with your friend, and now overnight they're your enemy. It's
Mhm.
very difficult.
there is that, yes, but I would like to think that I've elected a government, right? And I say I, meaning I as a nation, has elected a government that is afraid to do what is right by me as the people who elected. Do you understand where I'm coming from? I think that I need to believe that, and this is why Terry tells me I'm an idealist. I need to believe that the government is going to do what is right when it needs to do what is right,
But
especially in a case like this. I have to believe that the government will do it. If I don't believe that, then the whole thing doesn't work. The contract is tossed out.
mm,
You understand where I'm coming from?
but
And so I have to believe it. I have to believe that you're not going to say, well, you know, my friend just sent home 50,000 people. Just throwing a number out there. We know it's not that many. They're not paying them, but it's my friend, and I am so and so and so and so, and I have the power to right this wrong, and I'm not going to do it because this one person is my friend. I can't live in a world where I believe that is a situation. Not that I can't live, but I refuse to believe that that would be the situation. I have to believe that if I elect officials to do the job, then they're going to do the job. I think what we need to do as the people is to insist that they do the job
so Ayo, what
through,
happens in the world?
through the measures that are put in place for them to do the job. Huh?
Sorry, what happens in a world where that person is not just my friend but my brother? What happens in a world where that person is myself? Because we actually do have situations like this, right? So yeah, you are an idealist, and but
I'm just saying that this is the world I prefer to live in my head sometimes, right? I like to believe that people are going. No, that people don't always do what is right, and this is been proven to me over and over. They don't necessarily do what you think they'll do because it's the right thing to do, right? And I think even up to probably a few years ago, this and even now sometimes I keep having to remind myself people don't do what is right because it's the right thing to do. But I have to believe that our system works. I have to believe that when our system doesn't work, then there are avenues that we can go through to make sure, even if it means walking on the streets with placards. You understand? I have to believe that there are avenues that we can force those people to do what is right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the whole thing doesn't make sense. We can toss out the contract and we can just decide, well, look, this country is a banana republic.
No, I think you're right. I think we do have avenues that we need to think about. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Making sure we can force people to do the right thing. But just to close off on this part of the discussion, for sure, we need to think about this in this part of the economy in the post-COVID environment. I really think we need to think seriously. This is an opportunity, I think, to ensure that in the post-COVID environment, that the benefits of this sector are more fairly distributed, and we need to deepen participation. In my view, we need to deepen participation, ownership of these same set entities. And if it is the case that the owners can rack up massive debts to the employees, then let the employees participate in ownership. Then you're essentially taking a loan from the employees. Right.
It should move to a point where they have interest after some years. That's where we need to go to. And not just in those entities, but
yeah, we have a set. Sorry, we have a sector where a number of workers have taken 40% cuts. This is essentially a loan, interest-free loan, right, to the entity, right? Why not transform this debt into some form of equity and keep on and use this as a vehicle going into the future to deepen ownership and broaden ownership by the workers in this industry, right? I think this is opportunity. We're facing a rough time with regards to tourism, but it's an opportunity to use it to help to increase participation, make more fair the distribution of benefits from this part of our economy. But yeah, those are just on it. So I don't know if you have any further remarks.
Devaron?
Well, on that, I always say follow the money. Is an unfortunate reality is that the persons who are responsible for pushing exactly what you just said, when we look at it, it's often the contract is not with the people, it's often with money. And I think that is something that we have to start looking at, and why we continue to face these problems because the persons responsible cannot hold the other individuals accountable because they're in bed with them. And that is one of the very real realities that we need to start looking at.
Mm-hmm. I'm not disagreeing with you on that, and I know that these things happen. I just choose to believe that even when those, and look, we saw what's happening there with is it Clico? Was it Clico? It's Clico with the gentleman who what was the check again? 3.33 million or something. It was a very funny number, 6.66 or something. It's a very strange number. So we know that these things happen, and it happened at the highest levels in our society. I would like to believe that I live in a country that if he was still alive, that then the person who was involved in that would have faced some kind of retribution for those actions. I would like to think I live in that space. Of course, that can't happen now. But
all right. This face justice.
Just right. Because justice is necessary. Unfortunately, the person who is still alive, little seems to be happening on the whole issue. What? He's just out on bail until when? He's not a young man. Do you understand the point I'm making? So, but I still have, and even in the face of all that evidence, I still have to believe that somehow, somewhere, that we can right this space.
Yeah. All right. So before we close, though, do we have any further questions or comments from the audience?
Mm-hmm.
I think we have one here from Douglas. Troutman, we need to establish a multi-party think tank immediately funded to assist in tweaking plans and moving them to implementation. So I think we could agree with that. It would be nice to have buy-in with the future plans for our project across, I guess, education, regional integration, the symbolism, and of course, tourism and economy. It would be nice to have broad buy-in from both political parties. Whether that will actually materialize in the adversarial system that we have is another matter, but I think I could agree with that.
Anderson is telling me idealistic hope springs eternal. Yes, I have to believe. If I do not believe, why am I here? And this is, I'm removed from reality. right? I'm not removed from the reality. I just have to believe that we can do better because I know we can do better.
I guess also from Anderson,
Um,
given the ownership base of many of these entities, is that so easy to share or expand the ownership base, right? So I guess Anderson, just to put a final point on, well, the point that I was making, in the context of COVID, we have employers in the tourism sector who are not paying staff full wages, right? We have a lot of individuals who are essentially being give their staff is granting the employers an interest-free loan, essentially racking up debts in terms of salaries payable. This is an obligation owed to the workers. I'm thinking, I don't know how easy it would be, but if this situation were to allow to persist, then the a company is financed through debt and through equity, and we have very easy mechanism to transfer equity to debt and debt to equity. And if the payable, the salaries payable is a form of debt essentially now, can we not think of using the opportunity, and can some employers not actually use this as an avenue to not pay a lot of money to workers, but rather transfer ownership to them in a major way at this point in time? That's something I'm thinking about in the current context. Whether that is something that's possible or possible is something else. Beyond that, though, workers, I think a part of their remuneration could be salary and also interest in the entity. But in this tourism sector, that's something that we need to think about. We should have been thinking about it before COVID, and it definitely is something that we need to think about after COVID, because we are seeing, and we don't like to see this, but this is what we're seeing. We're seeing that in the good times, a lot of the suites from the entity, from the tourism sector, from the hotels, these entities in particular, the benefits are accruing to a few in society, and then in the face of a national crisis, a worldwide crisis, a pandemic, the fallout is being foisted on the backs of the many, right? And these many people, a lot of them are not in the positions to be able to withstand. We have a situation in Barbados very recently where workers are working at an entity for over 30 years, or about 30 years, as long as, almost as long as I've been alive. And at the end of the day, you want to send them home without severance. This is a very vexing thing, and something that we need to think about fixing.
yeah.
And I would add and say we should not paint the entire sector with a single brush, because there's certainly those that have genuine financial difficulty on the issue. And I think at a policy level, largely we have to start looking at tourism not as a seasonal form of investment, because it's very seasonal, but something year round. And maybe that would help with the viability of some of the smaller entities now that are unable to actually stay afloat. Because we must remember that for the most part, they make money for 6 months, not 12. So essentially, we need to make tourism more viable at the policy level so more individuals can benefit for a longer period, and therefore they can increase their resilience in the long run.
Yeah, that's true.
At that point, I think that tourism, I don't know if we, because I do work in tourism sector to an extent in terms of the short-term rental market and so forth. And I'm not really certain if people don't come during the
Off season.
Yeah,
off season because of anything that we do here. This is the question I've always asked. Like, what control do we have as a region, or rather as a country, because we want to make people who depend on tourism, as an island that that affects how people travel. I think that that's something that's external to us, but I could be wrong, and maybe there's more that we can do to help people traveling a little bit more on the off season. But to my mind, and it's something that I have thought about, like, are they external reasons only, or you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
But I take your point, yeah. But as we bring this, because I didn't even realize that we are kind of past the time, and as we bring this to a close, I just want to ask both of you to give your final thoughts. And this was a great session. Thank you both. So you go first, Devaron. You can give your final thoughts.
Well, first of all, as you said, it was definitely a great session, and thank you, the audience, for engaging with us and asking questions. And I would really finish by saying that we are going to have our 54th anniversary, or rather independence, tomorrow. And it's really a time for persons to reflect on how we can improve as individuals, as a family, as a community, and as a state going forward. We can't leave it to just other individuals to do, but as corny as it sounds, Michael Jackson said, the man in the mirror, how do we make our every single day better for ourselves and those around us? I think is really what we have to start thinking about.
Yeah, I fully endorse those comments. So in closing, well, thank you, the audience, for questions, and thank you for sticking with us and listening. Um, and happy independence to all of you out there. I wish it was in Barbados because I am not going to get much conkeys. I'm not going to get much by the way of all of the the paraphernalia and the different the sweets that accompany um, independence in Barbados. So I wish I am missing, but anyway, yeah. So as we go forward into the future and we think about our independence project, we need to think about ways, in my view, of how to go about, I guess, deepening it and expanding it in with regards to how we can expand the enfranchisement of individuals in our state, how we can deepen participation at the political levels and in the economy. In particular, on my two areas of focus, like how do we ensure that our people are reaping the rewards and are able to contribute in both the economic sense, both the political sense. I think these are things that we need to think about going into our future as a new republic, hopefully next year, and hopefully within our lifetimes, Ayo, within the current generation, a further or a nation within the Caribbean state. And let's hope, well, at least I can hope that can happen before I, sign off the planet Earth.
I'm
So
right there with you. I'm hoping for the same thing. Sorry, you weren't finished?
yeah, that was it for me.
Right. Yes, I'm right there with you, hoping for the same thing. And as we move on to 54 years of independence, I hope that I live that long. I hope I live to see 54 years. It is not a small number, it's a huge number. And I think that having been independent so long, there's so much that we have done, but there's so much more that we need to do. And a lot of things that we need to do, we really just need to be brave and do it. There's no one stopping us from doing anything. The only persons who are stopping us from doing a lot of the things that we need to do are ourselves. We have to believe in ourselves. And as I say that, this is the end of our program. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, invite your friends to join us, and we'll be right back here next Sunday from 5 p.m. And to my co-hosts Terry and Devaron, thank you for being here and for the hard work that you both did. Not sure what that was to help to produce this show so successfully. So take it away, Terry. Thank you so much, Devaron, and congrats again.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. I guess next time we'll talk about your MPhil dissertation. And
Well, we wouldn't want to bore the audience.
Before we go, I know we just ended the program, but Devaron, I absolutely forgot. I wanted to ask you about that. So let's close the program with what was it that you, your MPhil, what was it about? What did you write? What did you research and write about? And you can take like a few minutes to just make it as listener friendly as possible. Yeah.
Well, ultimately, I recognize that the region has been discussing the same development issues for 54 years in Barbados' sense or context. And I began to ask myself, as a political scientist, what are some of the contributors to this development issue and on a development issue? And certainly there are many, but me as a political scientist, I'm interested in institutions. And our major institution is our Westminster system. And I looked to see what are the deficiencies within our Westminster system and how they contribute to our underdevelopment. So I looked at, for instance, adversarial politics. We often praise the political party as one of the drivers of our development, but we never discuss how the political party is actually one of the contributors to our underdevelopment because they're very partisan in how they distribute resources. And I also looked at how there's an absence of sufficient participation by people because the idea is that If sufficient people are participating within a system, they will act in their interests. If you have a very small number of persons participating in the interest, or rather in a system, that small minority will act in its interest. So it's looking at how then we could broaden political participation and therefore impact on the outcomes that come out of our political system. And one of the ways going forward, I looked at the use of technology and using social media to broaden that participation. So one of the advantages that we have is all of us have a cell phone in our hands. Most of us have a cell phone in our hands. How do we utilize these devices that we can continuously engage and keep pressure onto our political system to ensure that the outcomes of it are to our benefit as opposed to a select few? So that's pretty much what it looked at, and how do we use that technology going forward?
Okay,
Excellent.
we'll discuss this.
I'm so sorry that we weren't able to discuss it. Next time, we're definitely going to discuss it.
We'll discuss it next time. All right, Ayo?
Right, Terry, take it away.
All right.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you for staying. Bye.
Thanks.